My name is Monica, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how doctors shape our decisions and how more often than not they can actually persuade our decisions. So first, let's take a look into the typical modern Western doctor's office. This is usually a cold, sometimes even hostile environment. Oftentimes, patients feel a huge disconnect from their doctors between waiting for a referral, getting a booking, having to go see a secretary, and then finally those long wait times to actually see a doctor. It's no wonder that patients often feel, well, impatient. This disconnect that we often feel with our doctors leads us to feeling that we're on a different level of a playing field than them. So what does this mean? Well, this means that usually we see them as an authority figure. But why is this something that's bad? Even if we just perceive them as having power, how can this be something that negatively affects our lives? Well, in reality, we now know, thanks to Hoffling and colleagues, that in reality, even if we just perceive someone as having power, more often than not, this can actually lead them to having power. So what Hoffling and colleagues found was that if we see someone as an authority figure, we're more likely to be persuaded by them than the people around us. A really good classic example of this is the Milgram experiments. So in this experiment, there was an authority figure in a white lab coat, much like a doctor. There were participants that came into this experiment and were asked to administer shocks to a complete stranger based on whether or not they answered a question right. In reality, they weren't actually doing so. They were just under the impression that they were. It was actually very interesting just because a lot of the participants afterwards, when they were debriefed, stated that they were shocked by how far they were willing to go. They were being blindly obedient to someone just because they saw them in a white lab coat. So now how does this apply in a medical context? So we can think about seeing someone in a white lab coat as a figure of authority. What does this mean? This means that if they give us a diagnosis, perhaps we're more likely to believe them, even if we feel like maybe in our gut that doesn't quite suit us. If they give us a prescription for something that we don't understand, maybe we're less likely to ask them to clarify what it's for, what the side effects are, what it could do. There are many examples of what an authority figure in the position of a medical field can do to us in terms of persuasion. So with that in mind, we can make a personal change. We can decide to keep these things in mind. And with the hopes of this, we can hope to reshape the Western medical system to be a more equitable playing field for everyone with less blind obedience. So now we have this plan, and we want to put this plan into action. What do we do? There are 3 easy steps that we can take in order to make personal changes to hopefully take our medical care into our own hands. The first is to stay conscious. Do you find yourself noticing that maybe there's power placed over you in these positions? Do you change your behavior because of this power? With these dynamics in place, do you find yourself more readily agreeing to things that maybe your intuition is telling you that you shouldn't? Keeping these things in mind can help you realize that there is something in place that you need to stay conscious of so that you can change. So the next step is to stay equal. This step means that we need to learn to humanize our doctors and learn to humanize our caregivers as a whole. This can be very difficult because there are usually systemic barriers put into place that can prevent this or make this difficult for us. However, if we remember that our doctors are humans, hopefully we can remember that humans make mistakes. We have conflicting ideas, and oftentimes we're not really correct. Keeping this in mind means that we can remember that just because they have an idea for us doesn't mean that we don't have to ask questions. Because really, we should. We should stay curious. If you think that you don't understand something to the fullest, you have the right to ask, why? What? What will this do? What will this mean for me? In terms of my health, how will I be affected? You have the right to ask questions because at the end of the day, your health is what matters. So in summary, we see the doctors as a position of authority. And if we don't keep this in mind, oftentimes this can persuade us in one direction or another. This is important. Why? Because your health is important. It's important to keep this in mind because healthcare matters. Our medical system is very important to each and every one of us. But also, there's authority figures in multiple different fields. There's authority figures in this room, outside of this room, no matter where you go, that can easily persuade you. By keeping these things in mind, we can hope that one day we can make a more equitable playing field for us all, in the hopes that one day maybe we'll understand things more, maybe we'll be less obedient, maybe we'll be more obedient, who knows. The point is that we want to even out the playing field, and then in the hopes of that, we can take our own lives into our own hands to the best that we can. Thank you.